A few weeks ago, I sat down and talked to my grandmother's brother, my great-uncle Stephen. Uncle Steve is known in my family for being somewhat different when it comes to political beliefs. In March of 2023, he published a book on why climate change is not real and how it is instead a result of normal temperature fluctuations. We sat down in my kitchen to catch up just before my cousin's bar mitzvah, the reason he had come all the way out from Milwaukee. Wasting not a moment, Uncle Steve pointedly asked me about my opinions on global warming. I knew this was going to happen. For years, I had heard the stories of him passing out flyers at family events and cornering cousins with lectures and indoctrination. Despite the fair warning, I was still struck off guard. "You are the most stubbornly incorrect person I have ever met." "Of course you believe that. You live in California." It is so interesting to argue with someone so confidently wrong. Yet these critiques he threw at me were followed by the most surprising comment of them all. "Thank you so much for talking with me about this. Nobody ever does." Some people in my family had told me that Uncle Steve pushed his beliefs onto those around him, stubbornly set in his narrow view of the truth. What they didn't tell me is that he graduated Cornell with a degree in chemistry, received a master's of polymeric materials from Brooklyn Polytechnic Institute, and attended Wharton. In short, he is highly educated and has thought through his opinions. What I learned in that moment at my kitchen table was that for the last decade, the world had been training me to ignore people with opposing views because they are just misinformed. It turns out that two well-meaning individuals can disagree on essential issues about science, politics, or even life itself without one of them being the bad guy. Somewhere in the last 15 years, America has collectively forgotten this lesson. There is a term in social psychology called group polarization, and it describes when a group of people gather based on similar beliefs. Those beliefs are radicalized over time. Professional sports communities, for example, celebrate group polarization. This is why everyday people stand shirtless in the Wisconsin winter with blocks of cheese on their head. Group polarization has also been the engine driving movements for social justice throughout history, from the Montgomery bus boycott in the 1950s to rainbow flags flying across San Francisco. Group polarization encourages the sharing of beliefs, and as those beliefs are shared, they deepen, binding community members and creating the impetus for social change. But for every bright spot, there is also a shadow. Despite its contributions to the good of society, group polarization has also given rise to misinformation, paranoia, and even hatred. From the KKK to ancient alien enthusiasts, group polarization binds communities. With the rise of online communication in the early 2000s, these groups have now metastasized from isolated barns and basements across America to chat rooms, online groups, and message boards with tens of thousands of anonymous members. It is easier now than ever before for people with the same beliefs to connect, no matter how radical their opinion. So just 2 weeks ago, there was a presidential debate. One presidential debate. But if you looked at the news headlines, you would have thought there were two. Fox News wrote, "Trump allies claim victory in debate with Harris." Criticized moderators for being pro-Kamala activists. Yet MSNBC claimed that Trump would be a fool to debate with Harris again, and Trump lost in the wilderness of his own confusion in debate with Harris. Many readers of both of these websites wouldn't even acknowledge the other's beliefs and are stubbornly set in their narrow view of the truth. Sounds a lot like my family fighting with Uncle Steve about climate change, doesn't it? And that's because it is. It's all the same. Most people, when they hear the words polarized or gridlocked, think of the government. They think of the US Senate, unable to pass legislation, stalling itself into government shutdowns. They think of endless committees, pointless administrative hearings, and at the end of the day, nothing ever gets done. It turns out that polarized and gridlocked are ways to describe our population as much as they are ways to describe our politicians. It is now customary to stop being friends with someone over different political beliefs. It is now commonplace to slander your peers for the crime of disagreeing with you. It is now normal to hide your opinions for fear of social isolation. I bet each and every one of you sitting here today has looked at someone and scoffed to a close friend. How could anyone think that? I know I have. We are all a part of this problem. We have forgotten how to listen to people with competing opinions. We have forgotten how to have conversations with people other than those who simply echo our own beliefs. But it wasn't always like this. Think back to the 2008 presidential race between John McCain and Barack Obama. At a McCain rally, a woman said, "I don't trust Obama." McCain cut her off. He took the microphone out of her hand and responded with, "No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, a citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with." Can you imagine that happening today? Just 3 months ago, we all heard as President Biden, in front of 50 million people, criticize former President Trump for having the morals of an alley cat, language that wouldn't be tolerated in this school. We have collectively forgotten that to debate is to listen, and instead opted for a world in which the victor is the one who argues the loudest or throws the most insults. But listening is critically important. In fact, it is the only way to change or influence someone's views. How many times has somebody changed your opinion when you feel like they don't even understand your perspective? Maybe never. It turns out that listening can allow you to understand what someone believes, why they believe it, and what life experiences that they've had that lead them to those beliefs. Sometimes, once you understand another person, you'll be able to persuade them to see things differently. And sometimes, you'll realize that there are flaws in your own thinking. People tend to think that they know much more about their firmly set beliefs than they actually do. This is so common that it actually has a name. The illusion of explanatory depth, coined by researchers Leonid Rosenbilt and Franklin Keel in 2002, explains the phenomenon in which people are overly confident in their ability to explain complex and simple topics. But when someone asks open-ended questions, listens without judgment, and fully concentrates on the answers, not only can they learn something new, but also the mere act of listening can help push back against this cognitive bias. Why? That is because when people are asked to explain their views, they often realize they don't know as much as they thought they did. Arguing, criticizing, insulting someone does not give them the space that they need to rethink. Listening does. So maybe there's an Uncle Steve in your family, or in your history class, or at your job. Or maybe there's just someone that you think is wrong, but you've never really listened. Or maybe you've wanted to say something, but you've been afraid to. We need to all speak more honestly and listen more carefully. We need to start seeing the humanity in one another, especially those with whom we disagree. Thank you.